I have you now.
They want to mess with my droid. They're going to pay for it.
This is the way.
You may fire when ready.
Blow that piece of junk out of the sky!
The way you're fighting, you wouldn't have lasted long.
Hello there.
The ability to speak does not make you intelligent.
Welcome to the Star Wars Station podcast. My name is Colin. Carter is still out on his sabbatical, if you will. So, flying solo once again. I love that joke. It's Ahsoka's coming out next week, and I got to come up with an episode. I'm really happy to have this opportunity. It's a lot of fun. You'll notice there wasn't an episode last week. I got really busy with a bunch of personal stuff. It's school starting in the summer, all this other stuff where we're at. So lots of stuff going on, and kind of a drought of stuff. We want to save all this or talk about Ahsoka for next week. We had the Lando news the week before that, and so I've been racking my brain trying to come up with some content, and I really think I came up with a doozy. It took a lot of time to incubate in my head, and so without further ado, I'm going to detail my top 10 favorite on-screen moments in Star Wars. And I say moments, I'm using that word kind of loosely. I mainly want to stitch together some concepts that meant a lot to me personally and meant a lot to Star Wars fans as a whole. And of course, this is a biased list. It's based off me and my perceptions alone. I feel like I have left a lot on the table. There's a lot of, this is only screen media, not comic books or video games or anything like that. As well as there's really not any cartoon media in here. Whereas I can think of a lot that would be really good to talk about. I kind of want to keep this strictly on live action, either primarily movies, but maybe some television stuff as well. And I really think the number 1 and number 2 spots are going to surprise you. And then the second caveat I want to mention is it's really hard to rank this stuff. So whereas I have a top 10, it's really all of them are tied for first, second, and third. And so some stuff I'm taking into mind when I'm thinking about this stuff is, how did it feel sitting in a theater watching this stuff? How do these scenes reflect on them going all the way back to 1977 and taking in the whole picture and lens of what Star Wars is throughout all of their media? And so it's not going to be a perfect list because of that stuff. If you're sitting in a theater watching Empire Strikes Back, you're going to feel a way about A New Hope and what happened in Empire Strikes Back, right? So I think the biggest thing is nostalgia influences this list a lot. There's probably going to be some people's favorite scenes of when they were young and watched the prequels, or when they were first introduced to Star Wars watching the sequels, or if all they've ever played is video games, or all they've ever done is watch Mandalorian or Andor on TV. I think that would influence what people's top 10 is. And there is a lot to do. You got to watch a lot of stuff to take all of these things in and absorb them into this contextual thing to make the most of it. Here at Star Wars Station, we're mega fans. I think we do a really good job of encompassing that whole concept of being able to observe in a wide breadth of what Star Wars is and what it means to the broader scope of the lore and the characters and all this other stuff. So having said that, let's get into the top 10. So coming into the number 10 spot, again, it's real hard to peg exactly where this stuff is. And another thing is I watched all of these scenes so I could do the best thing. I kind of want to pull them up on Disney Plus just to do this thing justice and give you the best content there can be. So number 10 is the destruction of Alderaan coupled with Obi-Wan feeling the destruction and Han Solo and the gang coming out of hyperspace into the quote unquote asteroid field, right? And they realize, we as the viewer, we know what the Death Star is already. And we know it's awesome destructive power. But Luke Skywalker and Han Solo and all these guys don't. They're Imperial citizens. And up until this very moment, the Death Star is unknown to the wider galaxy. It's known to the rebellion, but that's relatively, a minuscule amount of people. And to a smuggler, to a farm boy from Tatooine, to his watchful guardian, it's a totally foreign concept that anything like this is anywhere close to capable of existing. So observing this scene through their eyes when Han Solo and Chewbacca come out of hyperspace and they're saying just after Obi-Wan has felt a great disturbance in the Force, as if millions of voices cried out, right? And then so you watch this scene and I think you can see some of George Lucas's genius seeping into this. A TIE fighter shows up just right as they enter. And Obi-Wan is able to pick up, hey, it's a TIE fighter. And then it comes on screen and the other characters are able to discern that. Obi-Wan was able to tell that it was an Imperial ship before the other folks were, right? And then it continues. It continues that Obi-Wan is able to tell, hey, this is no moon, right? This is a really cool thing that the stuff is going on and like they're just, hey, that's a moon. It's heading for that moon over there, Luke says. And Obi-Wan's like, no, that's we need to get out of here right now. And of course it's too late. They're in the tractor beam. And for me, whatever it is these concepts, if you look at just before this, is where Tarkin is a real butthead to Leia, or Leia, as he says. And it's like, oh, she's like, you need to give me the base or I'm going to destroy your planet. And of course she says Dantooine. And she's like, all right, continue on. And he blows it up. And, just the special effects are so good, right? Of however they blew the planet back up back in the day to do this. Obi-Wan, he's flush. I felt a great disturbance of force as millions of voices cried out in terror. And then all of this spurns so many quotable lines. Just before this is Jump to Light Speed. And here's the speech with Han Solo about the Force and how his experience with it. And then Chewbacca and C-3PO are playing the board game. If Carter here, he'd know what it is. I don't know what it is off the top of my head. But Han Solo's given the let the Wookiee win, right? Or he's playing R2, not C-3PO. But all this dialogue in between Alderaan blowing up and when they get to the and when they get to where Alderaan is supposed to be is one of the best Star Wars scenes there is. And you have to look back on this, like I said, it's all this reference of this being what, 50 years on that we've been listening to this stuff and quoting these lines and all this other stuff. And it's so fun. It's so fun how pivotal these scenes. When if you're just watching this or watching this as a kid like I was, it's just you're just watching a movie. But being this, going deep into the lore and having Luke feel the remote, Obi-Wan feeling Alderaan blow up, Leia's despair, Tarkin's callousness, and then just the complete and total fear of when the heroes come out of hyperspace and realize what they've got themselves into. And man, that's just, it does it so good for me, right? And I can't do just can't do the scene justice. I really can't. It takes all of these characters to make this scene so good as what it is. So that's number 10. Number 9 is in the same film, the destruction of the first Death Star. And so I'm partial to this one because, outside of the Devastator going after Leia's Corvette and shooting at it, this is the first Star War, right, if you will, of the X-Wings and other ships, all the rebels assaulting the Death Star. And oh my gosh, it again, there's so much context that you have from later on that you don't get from when this film is. But just from a general filmmaking perspective, what makes this film so good, and I feel like we're missing out on it a bunch, or you just, maybe it's a factor of getting old, and I don't feel the same peril that I do watching films that come out today as even today when I turn this film on, when I reviewed it for this blog post or for this podcast. I was watching this and I felt the despair, I felt the hope, I felt the joy, all this other stuff of when these characters are going in here to destroy the Death Star. And, all the X-Wing pilots, their wingmen are falling left and right. They're against this basically unstoppable foe. Darth Vader shows up, right? And it seems like all hope is lost, especially when Luke turns off his targeting computer. And they're like, you can see Leia and the rest of them in there in the command center. And they're like, what in the world is going on here? Right. And they have the graphics of the planet coming around. And it's just, if you could exist in these scenes, just think how the heart palpitations you'd have, knowing what the awesome destructive force of this Death Star, knowing that if these proton torpedoes don't hit home, that the Empire's going to go unchecked for untold generations, right? And you have the best pilots in the galaxy, Wedge Antilles and Porkins and all these other guys, along with a farm boy who they're entrusted with this whole thing. I can't imagine the stress that all the rebel leaders were facing, right? But he pulls it off. He listens to Obi-Wan and he reaches out with the Force. And just another thing is Darth Vader, his dad, he doesn't know it. We didn't know it at the time, whatever, is on his tail, breathing down his neck, almost literally. R2 gets domed. Oh my goodness. And he pulls it off. Tale as old as time at this point, it feels like. But they get away from the Death Star. Vader and Han Solo saves the day. They're all part of this success, right? And Vader escapes, if you will. Oh man. And this scene, as I'm talking about these, I feel like they should be higher on the list. But my goodness, having all of this stuff come together like this, the quality of the filmmaking, the quality of the characters, all the special effects, practical effects, all this would be CGI today. And it's almost a crime to go back and want to redo all this stuff and make it computer animated or something. But yeah, I can't say how fun and immersive this made me. James Earl Jones's voice, the little graphics of the targeting computers trying to lock on, all this stuff coalesces into one of the absolute best scenes in all of Star Wars, for me especially. So that's my number 9. On to number 8 is the Duel of Fates. And so what enhances this scene, and I'm excited. I'm excited. I'm skipping ahead just a tad. So this is in the Phantom Menace, right? And this is almost going to be like a you had to be there moment. Oh my gosh. So this isn't, I say the Duel of Fates. When this happens, when this came on the screen, it was also Anakin Skywalker in the N1 Starfighter, and he's out in space doing what Anakin does, right? And go attacking the droid ship with R2's help. Okay. So it's not just the Duel of Fates of this epic fight between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan and Darth Maul. It's all of this encompassing. And it happens basically all at once. So as Qui-Gon is fighting Darth Maul, these scenes intercut, right? There'll be a lightsaber battle, and then it'll flop over to Anakin in space. And then there's a more lightsaber battle, and Padme is fighting her way up to the throne room, and stuff like that. It's a really fun sequence. But the reason this is a you should have been there moment is I was there. And all of this stuff happened. So many fans lament how they wish they were old enough. I wasn't around in 1977 when Star Wars came out to be able to watch all this stuff. But I was there when Darth Maul ignited that double-bladed saber, right? And this fight that progresses on is just so epic. And it is epic also in the space part. A little less so with the Padme part, but you have to give it credit because she's doing her own thing, and it culminates in a really fun scene with Padme. So just the feelings of being there, like I said, watching that double-ended saber ignite. But then, as you progress as a Star Wars fan and learn more and more about this, you realize that Darth Maul is Darth Sidious's apprentice, and you learn more about the Sith, what that means, how capable, with the rule of 2, not just any person, any rando, anybody who shows a half bit of modicum of force capability goes and gets to be some Sith. They have to basically groom to be evil. And, Zabrak from Dathomir seems like they fit right into that role almost perfectly, right? But, Ray Park, how he depicted that, the tattoos, how that character was created, and then the fight, just unbelievably cool. Unbelievably cool. I can't say that. I can't stress that enough. How fun it was to be there, and even how fun it is to go back and watch where there's these interludes of getting to take a rest in the laser fence wall in that Naboo, under the Naboo palace, right? And then I think Filoni did that interview why it's called the Duel of the Fates, because you got basically 3 ways to go at this point. Especially after you watch Qui-Gon die, that leaves Obi-Wan, who is a Padawan, going against a Sith apprentice who is capable enough to kill a Jedi Master. And, what chance does a Padawan have against this guy? Especially after being knocked around in a lightsaber fight just previous. So, before Qui-Gon dies, what's going to happen here? And I'm paraphrasing. You probably need to go check out what Filoni says about all this stuff. But if Qui-Gon defeats Maul along with Obi-Wan, then Anakin will be taught under his tutelage. And Qui-Gon will be around at this point. And chances are the fate of what could have happened with the Jedi would have been starkly different with how defiant Qui-Gon can be towards the Jedi Council. He said earlier in the film, if you don't allow me to train this boy, then I will leave the order and I'll train him anyways. And so, it could be as time progressed and, the Clone Wars were getting closer to begin, that Qui-Gon would have seen the cracks in the Jedi structure and something could have been done to better mold Anakin into a better Jedi. And then, of course, what did happen was Qui-Gon died and Anakin came under Obi-Wan's tutelage after Darth Maul had died. And obviously we see what happened with that. And then the third what if is if Darth Maul had succeeded and killed Obi-Wan and Anakin, and Qui-Gon, and then, Anakin would have still destroyed the droid control ship, but he had to land somewhere, and an extremely capable Darth Maul would have been, for lack of a better term, potentially come into possession of an high potential Anakin Skywalker. So, I mean, that would be an extremely fun what if, going down that whole rabbit hole, because the Sith, they like to seek out other apprentices. They're always looking to undermine their master. And we know that Darth Maul was extremely frustrated with Darth Sidious. Finally we get to reveal ourselves to the Jedi. And, and that might sound like frustration, but they've been hidden for hundreds of years. It's been an aspiration for the Sith to be out in the open for quite a while. But I'd love to see, that would be a maker for a really fun episode to what if Anakin became Darth Maul's Padawan or apprentice, right? That's something to get into, but that's not what this is about. It's about the duel of fates. And of course, Anakin blows up the droid ship. And then, something I realized, and I've seen this a dozen times, and I'm sure it's obvious to most other people, but here's another Skywalker destroying a major capital ship type thing and saving the day, right? And which happens all across the Clone Wars with Anakin, which happens with Luke Skywalker, chronologically in real life previous to this. And now young Anakin Skywalker is destroying the droid control ship, heavily influenced by the Force, right? And then, of course, Padme at the end, it looks like they're captured at first, but they get brought to the throne room. And as resourceful and with the ingenuity that Padme has, she's able to pull the blasters that she has hidden in the throne and kill all the droids. And it is perfectly capable of taking out the Viceroy and all the little characters that are hold her up, and she's able to hold her own and basically recover the palace from the droid army. All these guys work together to make such a cool scene, such a fun end to a movie that is again, sitting in those theaters back in 98, 99 was so fun to watch. And I got to do it. I wish you could have been there. But gosh, Darth Maul getting cut in half, Qui-Gon dying, the basically reverse of the high ground, the laser fences made for such an interesting thing. And I really love how, you the fight is so suspenseful, and Qui-Gon dies. It's like, how is Obi-Wan going to have any chance of this stuff against such a scary opponent, such a capable opponent? But of course, just like it is, the arrogance leads to the downfall, right? And such a fun fight, such a fun fight. So that's number 8. Number 7, we skip ahead to Revenge of the Sith. And the scene I want to talk about here, there's a lot to this movie. You know, I could probably do, you know, if we did it would be fun to do a like a retrospective on this whole episode, right? But this is a scene episode, podcast episode. So at my number 7 is the initial first creation of Darth Vader and the death of Mace Windu, and that whole fight with Mace Windu versus Darth Sidious, and Order 66 entailing, right? So gosh, I watched this scene reviewing for this channel, and it's just after Obi-Wan has killed Grievous, and Anakin snitches on Palpatine that, hey, he tells Mace Windu Sidious is a Sith Lord. Windu tells Anakin, hey, wait in the council chambers, you will have gained my trust. And this is one of the most emotional, one of the most pivotal scenes in all of Star Wars right here. And I don't remember this. I must have been too young to fully grasp what was going on, or, you know, I was in the midst of being in the Marine Corps and all this other stuff when that happened, when this movie came out. But it's Anakin sitting in the council chambers, and and Palpatine is influences. If any chance of saving her will be lost, he says. And like, you know, you can glean from this, it's easy to think these are just Anakin's thoughts, but it's not. Palpatine knows what's going on. He's that powerful in the Force. And then it's not a stretch to say that Padme is either, because she is looking out across to the Jedi Temple. And Anakin is looking from that Jedi Temple to where her apartment is. And you can, you know, George Lucas did such a fantastic job of communicating that emotional link between the two characters. I mean, Natalie Portman, Hayden Christensen, oh my gosh. And it just hits me like a ton of bricks, these scenes here. Hayden starts crying. You can see the emotion on Padme's face. And he makes that decision just right then and there. And that was his first, you know, well, probably not the first steps, but some of his final steps to committing to that dark side path, right? Of course, we all know the rest. He flies over to the Jedi Temple in the midst of the fight between Mace Windu and Sidious. And he comes in just in time as Mace Windu, Samuel L. Jackson is at that final confrontation with Sidious. And that lightsaber fight between Mace Windu and Sidious is phenomenal. You know, Samuel L. Jackson, he's one of the greatest actors of our time. I'll say that confidently. I have such fun consuming everything he's in and what all he does. And I'm so happy, so enthralled that he got to be part of Star Wars. I like the Mace Windu character. You know, he's not just this all-powerful, all-seeing, you know, badge of the bone, going to kick everybody's butt guy. He's that, yes, truly, but he's also an embodiment of what the failure of the Jedi is, and is what led to where they are now and are able to be so easily duped, right? I mean, even then, you can see at this very end points because Anakin is right there. Anakin has defied his orders, and it's overt that Sidious is harming himself with the Force lightning to just lure Anakin in even more, and to, I mean, there's so much furtherance to an end that is the mastermind and genius of Palpatine here, to create this horrifying visage to win over the populace, to entice Anakin into, Palpatine is creating this near death situation to get Anakin to stop Mace Windu, and of course we know what happens. He does, and immediately after this, this is the creation of the very first creation of Darth Vader, the first iteration, and Palpatine changes his voice. All the quotes, good and unlimited power, and rise, and names him Darth Vader, and they of course go out. The next step is to attack the Jedi Temple, and then he sends out all the Order 66. It's halfway through the movie, and all of this stuff coalesces into, once again, the best Star Wars there is. Some of the most quotable lines. The death of Mace Windu is so impactful. The creation of what we've previously known as Emperor Palpatine, the scarred visage. The culmination of the downfall of Anakin Skywalker into Darth Sidious, into Darth Vader. Oh man, this is why we love these films so much. I love it. I love it. Can't get enough. So that was number 7. Number 6 is the confrontation at the Sarlacc pit. And I know I'm jumping around just a tad, but this is a top 10 list. You got to order them somehow. And for me, this whole confrontation here, and it's easy. I don't want to say this is Return of the Jedi. This is the first of the movie. And I don't want to say just that first of the movie, but it really almost is. Because we get to go to Jabba's palace and we get to see everything that entails. The droids, the Rancor, the Jabba puppet, Boba Fett sitting in the back, Max Rebo and all the band members dancing around, Han Solo being rescued and all this other stuff. But to focus it down, to distill it down, is the culmination of this first act of the movie with the confrontation at the Sarlacc pit. And so I remember when I was real young watching this take place, and you're already, I wouldn't say scared half to death, but entertained to the point of like, oh my gosh, it's so amazing. And I mean, what's going on here? I've already said it once, but the Rancor, all these alien characters that's going on here, they put so much into this third movie that it's just off the walls cool. I mean, and you got to mention Slave Leia in the metal bikini, right? I mean, all that goes with that, but they go out, and the capstone of this first act, like I said, is the Sarlacc pit. And so you've already seen so much cool stuff, all the aliens and the pit of Carcoon, where you will be digested for 1,000 years. Oh, how ominous that is. And you roll up and you see the Sarlacc pit. How scary would this be? And that's what I mean, the trepidation of all this stuff is just really throwing you off, right? And you first see the Sarlacc pit. I remember being scared out of my shoes. And for the record, I know I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I am not I am the OG Sarlacc pit aficionado. I do not like the beak. If I had a choice, I'd take that out. But that's really a minor quibble, and I like joking about it a lot. But all these fight scenes at the end on the barges, and we get Hut Slayer Leia, we get Luke jumping around with his new green lightsaber. How fun would that have been to see that ignite back in the theater in the day, and jumping around saving everybody. And it's kind of a small quibble, and because on a lot of media it seems like a big deal. But the way, Boba Fett, he's working for Jabba in this, and he goes in from his perspective to go save the day. There's a Jedi bouncing around. And of course, we know Boba Fett has a long history with Jedi. And one killed his dad. I'm sure he's very upset by that. And so here's his opportunity to become even more in favor of Jabba's good graces, to stop this Jedi, get him thrown into the pit along with his thorn in his side of Han Solo. And the bumbling doofus Han Solo, blind, can't see where he's going, hits the jetpack, and away goes Boba Fett. And so it's a minor quibble because Boba Fett's able to, as we know, extricate himself from the pit of Carkoon, and does lives with the Sand People for a while, and seemingly has no animosity towards who still exists in the universe, Luke Skywalker or Han Solo. It's a trope almost that characters who are wronged on some level, regardless of what the morality is, it makes for good stories. There are almost so many James Bond movies are made with this same trope, that a wronged, the villain who was wronged in the past is out to seek revenge. And so, of course, the Book of Boba Fett didn't touch on that at all. I don't know if that's a misstep per se, but I'd love to see that. That's neither here nor there. But watching all these characters fall into the Sarlacc pit, seeing Luke Skywalker come and save the day, and he doesn't get out unscathed. He gets shot in the hand. All the stuff. It's just a fun scene. And what the implications are is why I rate this one pretty high. It could be higher than some of the others. Is what it took to put for the characters in the film, what it took to put this together and rescue Han Solo. How much he meant to the characters, what lengths they were able to go. Because Lando, how long is he being entrenched with Boba's forces? And even for Lando, that's got to be quite a stretch, because you got to be a scumbag to work for Boba Fett, or I'm sorry, work for what's his name? Jabba the Hutt. Yeah, you got to be a scumbag. I mean, because he's cruel. He's terrible. And another thing that occurred to me was a lot of in Jabba's palace and on the barge had a lot of the same vibe as the ship Kier was on. I forget the main bad guy in the Solo movie. I'm sorry, but seeing all this stuff go down, all the parallels that they tried to copy, makes it for so much fun. And again, Hut Slayer Leia, what this means for the universe as a whole, all the little fight scenes, no matter what they were, the notorious kick, right? That character's getting his own little short story in the upcoming From a Certain Point of View book. That's going to be fun. And then Luke Skywalker saving the day is once again some of the best Star Wars that we love to see. And I want to circle back to Luke Skywalker saving the day and why it means so much. And so, yeah, that is number 6. Number 5 is we're going back to Revenge of the Sith, and it is Obi-Wan confronts Anakin and the whole ensuing lightsaber fight. And you can't speak of that scene without also speaking of Anakin breaking Padme's heart. And I think it's obvious why this scene rates so high is because of just the emotional toll it does to the viewer. I mean, we've talked about it so much on this podcast. It's top 5, number 5 favorite scene. You know, you got the lightsaber battle and just the quotable lines that make this such a heartbreak. You know, think of like the level of betrayal and wrongheadedness and brainwashing and have to do to force choke your wife out like that. And then to have Obi-Wan just pop up. And I mean, it's easy to look at it from a moralistic point of view and this is the right thing to do and how evil Anakin was. And of course, not with justifying it in any way, but you know, Anakin thought he was the good guy in this whole thing. And the amount of betrayal he felt from Obi-Wan, you know, it's kind of silly to think of because who else is Obi-Wan going to be but the good guy? But I'm sure Anakin felt really, really bad in the moment and really betrayed by his brother as well. And then how that whole fight culminates with, you know, the such a soul crushing, penetrating line, the shrill voiced Anakin, "I hate you," as he's burning. You know, watching it again, it's such an emotional scene, and watching Obi-Wan walk away, it's just gutting. It guts you, right? Oh my gosh. I don't feel like I'm doing that scene justice, but you know, it's just one that we've all watched so many times over and over, and yeah, it's really hard to talk about. You know, such negatively emotional scenes, but you know, the lightsaber fight is the longest lightsaber fight. It's fun, it's cool, but it's got this emotional tinge to it. You know, like I've talked about previously, this Mace Windu versus Sidious. You know, it's an action scene, right? There's compared to this, is not a bunch of emotional stuff attached to it, but this one is, and so it makes it so much more weighty. It makes it so much more impactful. And so that's why it ranks so high on my list. So that's number 5. Number 4 is, for me, again, this is like a montage of scenes, and it's easy to say the whole encompassing, but to me culminates at the end of Return of the Jedi with the Darth Vader face reveal. And so, it's like I said, it's easy to say what all happened before this, right? And, you know, Luke has submitted himself to the Emperor, and he's got his own ulterior motive. You know, he's going to turn Anakin Skywalker from the dark side. And there's just so much that goes on in these previous scenes that builds up to this redemption of Darth Vader, the return to Anakin Skywalker. And, you know, it's Emperor Palpatine, strike me down, and, you know, strike me down, that whole scene. And the other pivotal moment here is Vader, through reading Luke Skywalker's mind, figured out that Leia exists. And this is the catalyst to get Luke to reach down and defeat Darth Vader. You know, he cuts his hand off and the lightsaber falls down through the shaft, right? And of course, Darth Vader's defeated. That means he's not a worthy apprentice any longer. And, it's Palpatine. He's going to go do what he does. And he can't have as powerful as Luke Skywalker around. He needs to motivate Vader, I guess. But there's so much going on. And there's so much, like, could Palpatine have transferred his consciousness into Luke's body and all this stuff that we get to reflect back on as all the new media has come out. That's really fun to speculate about. But then, Luke feels the good in Vader. He's talking about this whole time. And now Vader knows about Leia. And here's Palpatine going to kill Luke, going to kill his son. And that's not going to fly. Vader's not going to let that stand. And it's these coalescing of events that turn Darth Vader back to Anakin Skywalker. And the final scene of this is, let me look upon you with my own eyes. And the removal of the helmet. I remember sitting there watching this on a VHS tape, my friend's living room. And so we got to that reveal of Darth Vader's face, so impactful. And as you grow older, it just becomes even more so what it meant to Luke, what it meant to the galaxy, that Palpatine was dead, and this redemption of Darth Vader. And again, we could do a whole podcast episode probably on just this scene and what it meant to the galaxy, what it meant to Luke, what it meant to Leia, all these other things. So crazy, so fun. And again, the best Star Wars there is. So that's number 5. No, that's number 4. Number 3 is Empire Strikes Back and the first fight between Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader in Cloud City. And this is the big reveal. And I wish I could have been there a moment. And they've been having this brawl. The whole Han Solo has already been frozen in carbonite. So it's extremely emotional for Leia right here. But all of these scenes are a masterpiece in how to make movies, how to make action movies, how this confrontation should go down. The lighting, the silhouettes of the characters having the sword fight, the lightsaber fights here. Unbelievably fun, unbelievably cool. All the dialogue that culminates in, and everybody butchers this scene, right? But Obi-Wan, I probably can't even do it justice because, it's the end of the fight scene. Luke is disarmed, dishanded, literally, right? And it's such an intense one. Vader took his licks also, but Luke has been absolutely disheveled, has his hand cut off, and Vader's pressing down on there is no escape. And how fun was it? Is it Star Wars fans to listen to this? James Earl Jones's voice, David Prowse is doing this, and oh my gosh. With our combined strength, we can end this destructive conflict and bring order to the galaxy. And I'll never join you. If you only knew the power of the dark side, such iconic scenes. Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father. He told me enough. He told me you killed him. No, I am your father. It hits me so deep how emotionally impactful these scenes are. So fun. And it's the best Star Wars there is. It really is. these are impacting me so much. I really get emotional here on this stuff because I love Star Wars so much. It means so much to me personally, and I hope you stuck with me this far to get to these top two scenes. I love talking about this stuff. I hope you can talk with me about it on Discord and some other stuff. Wherever you want to do, you can reach out, and I want to share these feelings with whoever wants. Now, this one's going to be a bit of a sidestep, but not much. So, my number 2 scene is from The Mandalorian, Season 2, Chapter 8, where Luke Skywalker comes to Grogu and all of our gang's rescue here. So if you'll recall, Moff Gideon has been defeated by Din Djarin and is the holder of the Darksaber. And just after this, it seems to be maybe 20 or 30 Imperial Dark Troopers show up. And they remind me so much of Cylons or Terminators from James Cameron's Terminator films, right? Because there's these giant, unstoppable, robotic menaces. And like the main characters, Din Djarin, Cara Dune, Bo-Katan and her cohort, they're not going to stand any chance. And so if you recall previously, Grogu had called out to the Force on the planet and said, I need some help here. I need to find, that was the quest at this point, was Din Djarin was going to help Grogu find his people. And that was reaching out in the Force to help Grogu find his people. And of course, Moff Gideon captures Grogu and is taken to an Imperial cruiser. We spend like another episode figuring all this out, getting onto the cruiser, defeating Gideon, and the Dark Troopers show up, but the situation is dire. And so I'm going to circle back to what I love, and it's, you had to have been there. So I was watching this with a good friend of mine, and that X-Wing came on screen. I think I literally fell out of my chair. Because we knew somebody was coming, and they're not going to kill off all the main characters, but I think at this point, we thought it was going to be Boba Fett. He's going to do something cool to help them get out of this situation. We had no idea what was about to happen. And that X-Wing shows up on screen, and I had to stand up for the rest of this. And it was just uncanny what happened next. And so you really have to do this justice, you really have to look through the point of view of the characters that have just defeated Moff Gideon, and for all intents and purposes, they're almost to the summit of Mount Everest, and a bunch of evil droids are right at the top, about to push them down. And that X-Wing shows up. And this is one of the best scenes. For me, like I said, it's almost tied for first place. And you see those Dark Troopers turn and face. You see the look on Moff Gideon's face. And the other characters have no idea what is about to happen. And so, like I said, the look on Moff Gideon's face is just complete and utter despair. The forlorn. Giancarlo did such a fantastic job. He knows what's fixing to happen. And the best Star Wars happens right here. Luke Skywalker destroys brutally all of these Dark Troopers. And I can't even do it justice what this means for Star Wars fans, because previously, literally in the timeline of reality, Luke Skywalker was an old man in exile. And a lot of people have a lot of opinions about Luke Skywalker and how Disney had handled it and had handled the character. And so in a lot of ways, in so many ways, this is a redemption of the Luke Skywalker character. I mean, canonically, in the timeline of Star Wars, this takes place before that exile, and it's all canon. It still happens. But in reality, we got to see these scenes after that exile of Luke Skywalker. And so he comes in and just kicks butt, destroys everything. And it's not just the actors, it's the puppeteers who did all this with the Grogu puppet reaching out onto the monitor. You can tell there's a lot of this force connection going on that I've already talked so much about in today's episode. But it all culminates here with is about to end here with the hallway scene of Luke Skywalker jumping out of the elevator, and how he dismantles these things is the absolute best. It's so fun, way cool, best Star Wars there is. And of course it ends with Din Djarin revealing his face and taking Grogu to train as a Jedi. It's an emotional scene, and I want to circle back to this later, and it's for a lot more reasons. But watching this for me, having Luke Skywalker appear like this, having him become, for a brief time, Grogu's Jedi Master, is just unbelievably impactful to me, and I'm sure to all Star Wars fans as a whole, it really is. So that's my number 2. I really do think it's tied for number 1, but and I guess I'll get into it here in a minute. Why my number 1 edges out above this one just a hair? I mean, it's just the smallest fraction. But before that, I want to get into some honorable mentions. And as I was watching this, I started out with just a couple, but I came up with a few more, and I won't spend a ton of time on all these because I really do want to talk about the number 1 a lot. And a lot of the honorable mentions, what are the best of Star Wars, is pod racing. It's such a fun concept. Anakin's the only human can do it. He wins. There's a lot that went into. I mean, that's how Anakin got to be. If he'd have lost the pod race, he wouldn't have gone to be who he was, right? From the sequels, there's 2 scenes that were really impactful to me in a major way. And it was in The Last Jedi, Kylo Ren. You get the cool scenes with the TIE silencer coming out from the big ship. And he destroys the hangar bay, right? Seeing that ship fly along, how it worked in those scenes was really fun. But the capstone for that was Kylo Ren hesitating to pull the trigger and kill his mother. And of course, the 2 TIE fighters did it. He didn't have to. But it seemed like again, highly emotional thing that was really riveting and made for some really good Star Wars for that movie, right? Again, in the sequels, the whole ending of the whole thing, the final confrontation on Exegol, and all of that encompasses what makes up the whole thing of all the ships showing up at the end, Lando's fleet destroying all the Star Destroyers, but really it's Rey confronting Palpatine. I am all the Sith, and I am all the Jedi, and destroying Palpatine and the Sith Eternal once and for all. Those were such fun, such impactful scenes that I really loved. Another one from the Obi-Wan TV show that really hit me hard was in the final episode was Obi-Wan versus Vader. And you didn't kill Anakin Skywalker, I did. And the whole saber fight between that they were able to put together that Ewan and Hayden did was really fun. And then I guess finally was at the end of Revenge of the Sith was the birth of the Skywalker twins. And then also the birth of, you can say, Darth Vader in the suit, right? And so it's a mirror image. You have Leia and Luke being born, and Padme says, I know Obi-Wan, I know there's good in him. And then you have this Vader being put in his own, like a portable sarcophagus that symbolizes his shame, his failure, all this other things. On one hand, you got new life. On one hand, and the other, you have the embodiment of failure. So those are the honorable mentions. The final scene I want to get into is the end of the Rogue One film. And this one is my number one for many reasons. It came after A Force Awakens in real time. I'm going to be kind of slapshot here. It's the emotional impact here, right? I mean, all the characters die at the end. They all give their lives for this greater cause that is such a big deal. And it's these sacrifices that is the best of Star Wars. That is the best of filmmaking. That is the best of writing. That is the best of all these spheres that enthrall us as movie viewers, as Star Wars fans. And so, Jen Erso, the trials that she faced, she gets to confront the evildoer that, Krennic, that stole her life away. She was a kid on a farm. She had basically every option open to her, and this jerk shows up and irrevocably changes her life. She has to go live with Saul Guerrero. I mean, who would want that? And then Cassian Andor, we get to see the trials he faces, thank goodness, with the Andor TV show, and how we know how it ends for Cassian Andor. And Bodhi Rook, K2SO, all these other folks here. Admiral Raddus up in space. And the tactical genius with the Hammerhead Corvette. I mean, because they had to get the shield down to transmit the message. And he gave his life. The Empire showed up. The capital ship was destroyed. The Death Star's in the background that obliterates Scarif. And, the Empire is cold. It's cruel. Everybody here, the only people who survived was Leia escaping in the Corvette. And why this is so impactful for me is it boils down all of what I just said. But two things. One is just I was with my closest friends in the theater watching this. And what has been one of the greatest laments over time, a lot of it we don't have a choice. We didn't exist to see these films when they came out. but I got to watch this one front row with my closest friends in the theater. And, this scene was rumored, but we got to watch it real time of Vader's hallway scene. And so it's the capstone of all this Scarif events here, and the transition of the Death Star plans onto the to lay on the Corvette, and being able to share that moment with my friends in the theater, it tops everything else. It really does. And it's just this complete euphoria that you only experience a handful of times in your life. I don't want to exactly equate it to watching your kid being born or marrying the love of your life or some sort of like tangible achievement that improves your life in a major way. I mean, but outside of that, being able to share that with your friends, with your people, with your peers that you care about Star Wars the most, it's just, there's almost no parallel. There really isn't. I mean, in a lot of the TV shows, and why we started this podcast is so that we can maintain those moments for all time, that we get the most of sharing them with our friends. And so it was that hallway scene. I mean, I've had so many discussions with friends over the years, and for the characters in that hallway, the despair you'd feel, and not necessarily in a negative way, but think about if in real life, witches and wizardry and magic doesn't exist, obviously, and so at this point in the Star Wars universe, the Force is some forgotten thing, right? It's witchcraft and wizardry that doesn't exist because the Jedi don't any longer. And enough time has passed that we don't realize that the denizens of the universe don't realize that, it's just a myth. It's exactly as Han Solo put it. I don't believe, it's all just a bunch of hokum, right? And so just as if Gandalf walked in, knocked on your door and said, "Hey, I want you to go on a quest with me," and was doing magic tricks all around, like bona fide magic tricks, would be the same as these guys seeing Darth Vader. Something you've only heard in myth and rumor, ignite his lightsaber at the end of the hallway. Gosh, I could go on forever and ever and ever about this stuff and how impactful it is. So I guess I'll leave it at that. Again, it's such an emotional toll for me, and I'm so blessed. I'm so privileged to get to share this with my friends and exist. I really do think we live in the best times of our lives. And I'm sure that's maybe a fallacy of how we, I'm sure everybody thinks maybe that's the way it is as they're living, but we get to look back and we have it better than they did, but you're not sure on that either. And as far as Star Wars goes, of course I like to go back and see those old films in the theaters and get to feel those feelings, right? But we still get to do it. We're getting the TV shows, we're getting more movies, and it's getting, Star Wars is always going to be good. We're always going to be something, we're going to, there's a lot of criticisms. There's always going to be gems that we're going to get to pluck from everything else. And I really think it is going to be more gems than it is whatever else, anything else could be. So that is the meat of the podcast. I hope you enjoyed my top 10, and I would love to hear your feedback. Um, I love putting it together. I watched a lot of video to hopefully elevate what I was capable of doing. Um, and get you some quality content here. Thank you for listening to this. And the next segment we have is how the force works with the, and listen to that now.
That's not how the Force works.
So for how the force works is, since Carter couldn't be here, he submitted a question, and it is, what is, and it, Ahsoka's coming out next week, y'all. So we're going to pivot into that just a little bit. And Carter asks, in regards to Ahsoka, what is the significance of Morai? Why is he/she always following Ahsoka around? So, to get this information, you have to watch the Clone Wars cartoon. There's no other ways around it. And you can bet dollars to donuts that the Morai is going to be in the Ahsoka show. We're all waiting with bated breath of how that's going to show up and what it's going to be. And technically has already appeared in when Din Djarin met Ahsoka in The Mandalorian season 2. So what is the Morai? The Morai is the closest equivalent we'd have to it is an owl. And so there's so much you can, my wife has a lot of mythos about owls and a lot to do with that. And I don't really want to get into that. Couldn't do that justice. I would love to hear what y'all have to say about that. But this is probably crosses over into a lot of the same realm of what people believe. And so, in the context of Ahsoka and the Clone Wars, Ahsoka, Obi-Wan, and Anakin went to a planet called Mortis. And I'm probably going to not do it justice. I don't know exactly, but it might have existed in a parallel realm or a pocket dimension, or I don't know if this is where anybody could just casually go to. You can't, set coordinates for Morai and it's 17 parsecs away. You have to be drawn there almost, right? Of which Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka were. And who lives there but the father, the daughter, and brother. And basically, the daughter is the embodiment of the light side, and the brother is the embodiment of the dark side. And I think the father is the embodiment of the bridge between or something like that. I could be wrong. But the story progresses, it's been a long time since I've watched it. You need to go watch it yourself to do it justice. But the brother kills Ahsoka, and the sister gives her life to save Ahsoka. And in her last dying moments, transfers her essence into the Morai. And so throughout the rest of the Clone Wars, which there wasn't much left at this point, and all across when Ahsoka showed up in Rebels, the Morai was present. The Morai was in the World Between Worlds. The Morai was at the Malachor Sith Temple when Vader and Ahsoka were having the confrontation there. And finally, the Morai is in a very brief moment when the Mandalorian when Din Djarin meets Ahsoka on Corvus. And I mean, it looks like an owl. You blink and you'll miss it type thing. But in a lot of fantasy stuff, the animals don't exactly cross over one for one. It looks slightly different, but that's what it is Ahsoka's guardian angel, if you will. But if you run into this Morai, Ahsoka's not far, pretty much. So that is how the Force works. The next segment we have is HoloNet News.
You made the HoloNet.
Again, next week is Ahsoka, and all of the news revolves around that. There isn't much else going on. We haven't heard anything about movies. The Lando news was a couple weeks ago, but everything that's in there is about Ahsoka, and we are super excited to watch that show. We've got we're going to put out tons of content. We're going to put out episodes every week, going over all the individual episodes, or the first two for the first one, right? And then we're going to probably do a culmination of how we felt about the whole thing. But the first bit of news is the directors. So there's 8 episodes, and we'll see the first 2 start next week. But Dave Filoni is, of course, directing some. I believe, could be wrong here. Steph Green is directing some. And she's directed Watchmen and The Billions, the Americans, and an episode of the Book of Boba Fett. So, we're getting good stuff there. Peter Ramsey directed Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse. So how great is that? We're getting some big guns in here. Jennifer Getzinger, she directed episodes of Mad Men, Daredevil, Westworld, Jessica Jones. So again, no stops are being pulled out for this Ahsoka show. Geeta Vasanti Patel is another director. She's directed an episode of House of the Dragon. She's directed Santa Clarita Diet. Some other little stuff here and there, but I like that Santa Clarita Diet. Of course, I liked House of the Dragon. So I'm sure there's going to be some good stuff there. And of course, the season finale is going to be by Rick. Oh gosh, I'm so bad at this. I should have researched this more. Rick Famuyiwa, right? Of course, we know him. He's directed a lot of the Mandalorian stuff and Book of Boba Fett stuff. Maybe not Book of Boba Fett stuff. He's doing Skeleton Crew. He's all in this stuff. So it's so exciting to see this. That's who the directors are. It's going to be a huge treat. Gosh, the next little tidbit of news, what is this? I think is about the run times of these episodes. And so, episode 3 is what? I think I saw that as just over 30 minutes. Forget where I saw episode 1 and 2 were, but I think it's like an hour and a half of content. Yeah, 34 minutes and 50 seconds. Without credits, it's 31 minutes. So, it's going to be, we're going to get a lot to start off with. We're going to get probably some 30-minute episodes, wrap up what they want to do, and I bet the last episodes are going to be quite long. Hopefully an hour each, so we're getting some really good stuff out of it. And it's going to be really fun to enjoy all of this as much as we can, because the next bit of news is there is an Anakin Skywalker as portrayed by Hayden Christensen voiceover. That is like a flashback or callback to the past. It was a TV spot, and I'm sure you've seen it. I'm sure you've heard it, but it gave me chills at first. It's basically him being a guide or a master to, not a Jedi master. Can't say that, but he was a Ahsoka's master, right? Being a leader, being a teacher to Ahsoka, right? And so go seek that out. If you type in Ahsoka, it's going to be some of the most previous videos that show up. And it floored me to listen to that. I was so excited to listen to that. So yeah, there's been just a bunch of other little extra tidbits of probably the first 2 episodes that we're going to get to see. Different characters fighting. Sabine and Shin Hati squaring off. Ahsoka and the main character, the main big bad that we see squaring off. So looking forward to Ahsoka. It's going to be a major deal. I really hope that we get a lot of scenes. Maybe something I hope something cracks the top 10 list, that I can amend this list just after this Ahsoka show comes out, and we get to watch something that makes me stand up out of my chair, that gives me chills, and we get to have some fun watching. So yep, that's the HoloNet news. The last thing to cover is the Star Wars moment of the week.
We would be honored if you would join us.
My Star Wars moment is deeply personal. And again, it has to do, since kind of I'm flying solo, I got to putting this list together. And making this list isn't easy. There's a lot to think about. And then, you want to make a quality product. And I feel kind of silly putting that Luke Skywalker up so high. But this is what I'm about to talk about is the reason why. So I had a good friend of mine. He loves science fiction. He loves Star Trek like I did. He loves Star Wars. And so, in this moment of where Luke Skywalker came in to rescue Grogu and Din Djarin and the rest, he was there. And again, when I talk about how impactful being with friends is, being able to watch these shows with each other, I got to share this with him. And early this year, he passed away. He died in his sleep. And it was when the Picard show was coming out. And if you watch Star Trek or follow Star Trek at all, that Picard show was really top notch. If we were doing a Star Trek podcast, some scenes in that show would make this list, make a top 10 list, I think. I think we got to watch 1 or 2 episodes of that together, but we didn't get to the end. And so as I was putting this list together, it got to be super emotional and very sad that I didn't get to share with my good friend. And like this Ahsoka show, we'd be talking everything. We'd be so excited. We didn't get to watch Mandalorian season 3 and talk about that. And so you can't take your friendships for granted. When everything was suicide, so there's a lot of baggage left off with that. But really and truly, our lives are fragile. We don't know how good we have it sometimes, and be it car wrecks or drunk drivers or you just get called home, if you will. Being able to share the joy of Star Wars with your friends is what made that scene so impactful for me. And not being able to do that is is my Star Wars moment of the week, and the joy of being able to reflect on that. It made me feel how being able to enjoy that with him was just so worthwhile. And I'm happy I got to bear that with you. So yeah, thank you for listening. With that, that's the end of the podcast. I hope you made it this far. I'm not going to apologize for how emotional I am. It means so much to me. It means so much to get to share this with you. We have Twitter, we have Instagram. I think what is Twitter here? At Star Wars_station. Instagram is at StarWars.station. Not really capable of doing much on Twitch, but you're more than welcome to go subscribe or follow over there or subscribe if you want. And we want to play some games, but a lot of personal obligations don't really allow for that. We have a Discord. You can find it on our link tree. If you go to our Instagram, you can see that there. And how you can help this podcast the most is go to Patreon. And for as little as $1 a month, you can support us there. Every little bit helps. Of course, we publish these podcasts on YouTube. You could follow and subscribe there. And the tip at the top, the cream of the crop, what you can do is go to Spotify and Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. I hope I've earned that 5 stars. I enjoy making this every week. Carter is going to return for the Ahsoka shows. He has some very ambitious plans that I'm excited for. I don't know when that's going to come to fruition, but I'm very happy for his path forward. And I'm looking forward to making more Star Wars shows with him in the future. Again, thank you for listening, and thank you for making it this far. I love you all. Have a great day.